Happy Monday. Welcome into Crossing Broadcast. I'm Russ Joy. You knew that because you're an intelligent human being and you come back each and every Monday for this show. And I'm joined behind the scenes by the $1 million man himself. Yes, the $1 million man himself, Craig Dudek. He's on the other side of the glass. You probably won't see him today, but you might. If you close your eyes and you think just enough, think just hard enough, you can see that delightful long-distance runner himself, master of video and imagery at Crossing Broad and across the XL Media portfolio. This guy. We love this guy. Fantastic guy. But we are getting into it today because what happened, friends? Your team, your town, your Philadelphia Eagles walked away with a massive win against the New York Giants. Now, some people might have expected me to come out here and poo-poo the win because, well, after all, it's just the New York Giants. But nay, we're going to actually soak in a little bit of positivity today. Now, we're not going to be delusional. Delusional doesn't work for me today. But what does is actually assessing whether or not this was fool's gold. Was this the Eagles actually going out and asserting their dominance? Was this the Eagles that we expected, quite frankly, to be that Super Bowl contender? Is that what we saw? Or did we just see vast incompetence on the part of the New York Giants? And really, it was more their incompetence that led to an absolutely lopsided win for the Eagles. We're going to get into all that. But before we do, we're going to also make sure that we go out to the people because that is what it's all about. We're going to go out to the people who check in. Let's go out to, I see Nico noting the new music at the start on YouTube. The people who listen in the podcast feed, they don't get to experience any of it, but it's okay. Connor Allen saying the new music. Is that why Russ is late? Yes, I made that music myself. I didn't at all. We actually had Craig behind the scenes asking if we should switch the video to my camera. You should see, like, I did such a great job. There was so much dancing. People don't get to see the dancing behind the scenes, but don't worry. There's a lot of dancing as we get ourselves all ready. Now, I would like to get into the Eagles game a little bit. We are going to get into a teeny tiny little preview about Sixers Bucks, which looks like it'll be missing some star players on Wednesday night. And of course, the Philadelphia Flyers came home. They had their home opener. I'm not sure they know that they had their home opener, but we're going to talk about that as well. And what the hell is going on with that team? We will have a conversation about that. Notably, the captain getting put on the fourth line in his 800th game, playing left wing when he's a center. Some people saying maybe there's a problem with him in torts. We're going to know that. And if there's anything else, if we still have time, and there's something that you really want to talk about on today's show, then by all means, you can drop it in the comments section on YouTube, X, or Facebook. If you're on X, remember, you have to click on the video. You have to do the whole thing. It's really annoying. You have to click on the video, and then you can do the Then you can interact. It's like old Periscope. All right, let's get into the game. Oh, T from the TO3, by the way, also checking in. I did a show this morning. I hopped on the Morning Cup of Hockey show over on Daily Faceoff, which is co-hosted by Colby Cohen. He used to work here at NBC Sports Philly doing some Flyers coverage. So I had a lot of fun with him and his co-host Johnny. A lot of fun. I'd probably hop back on that show at some point down the line. They wanted to get some insight into what's going on around the Flyers. So we'll do that as well. Look at this Ford coming in with a little bit of positivity. Look at what a difference an Eagles win makes, and not an Eagles win that looks like it kind of felt like a fluke, like the game against the Browns. We were like, ugh. And you got the coach making national news this week. Not so much. Ford says, I spent the weekend along the Loyal Sock Creek and climbed a mountain with some buddies. Fantastic weather, great weekend, and an Eagles win. Ford, I assume those buddies included Kincaid and Pagan. Make sure you send some pictures over. We'll bring them up on the screen. As long as it had Kincaid. I need to see Kincaid. Does he work on leg day or not? That's really important. All right, anyway, we're going to get back out into it. And Jim Cochran jumping in. How about our Philadelphia Union scoring the game winner against themselves to end their season? Great stuff. Jim, this will be probably the only mention of the Philadelphia Union today. I got a text before we get into Eagles. See, now I'm going to continue to get sidetracked. Before, it was on Saturday night. Flyers are having their home opener. And I get a text from Phil Keidel, who used to write over at Crossing Broad and who I used to host CBFC with. And we used to do like this big kind of wraparound show. We talk about the EPL and we'd cover a little bit of Liga and La Liga and the Bundesliga. And he texted me out of the blue and he's like, hey, tonight's the kind of night that I miss doing CBFC. And I was like, why? Because I actively was not paying attention to the Union. I was at the Flyers game to go cover that and do the press row show. And he's like, well, the Union's playoff streak is over, or it feels like the end of an era, all that. I will go into more detail on Tuesday on my show, the Russ Joy Show over on YouTube at 8:30 a.m. I'm going to dive a little bit into the Union talk there. I know the people on Crossing Broad don't care as much, but I am going to talk about that a little bit on Tuesday because there's a really important quote that came out from Kai Wagner that I would love to give a little bit of actual traction to, where he kind of called out the construction of the team, perhaps some complacency, and also kind of put ownership on notice, which I thought was fantastic and actually should resonate pretty well with the fan base. But we are going to get to the Eagles here because the Eagles had a game that I think we expected them to have, where they go up to MetLife Stadium, which is an absolute dump. I hate that stadium. There are a few stadia in any, I said stadia, Craig. Make sure to mark that down. There are a few stadia in this country that I hate as much as I hate MetLife Stadium. It feels like a prison. It feels like a concrete jungle. I don't like the walk up to it. I don't like the inside. I certainly hate the overpriced concessions. It is not my favorite place to go see a game. But the Eagles went up and they were dominant. Now, they weren't just dominant in the sense that, oh, they racked up a bunch of points against the Giants, and that just means that they were able to kind of gloss over, some paper over some other things. No. The Eagles managed to figure out a way defensively to create the kind of havoc that we expected them to, certainly last year, certainly this year, especially this year bringing Vic Fangio into town. You thought, all right, they're going to figure out better blitz packages. They're going to figure out a way to use Fangio's defense from his own mind instead of from one of his disciples in Sean Desai. They're going to figure out a way to get to the quarterback in a meaningful way. And they did on Sunday. They made Daniel Jones' life an absolute living hell. Daniel Jones spent so much time on his back that by the fourth quarter, the Giants yanked him out of the game. And it wasn't even because they were like, all right, this game is out of reach. It was more like the Eagles are probably going to maim and unalive, as they say on TikTok, unalive Daniel Jones if we allow him to stay in the game. The Eagles were everywhere defensively. But I'm going to give a shout out to somebody who actually deserves having a shout out. Now, Craig, I shared it over to you. I think you could pull it up. Bryce Huff went on, it was a clip from WIP, and I think it was from the locker room last week. And I believe it was Elliot Shore Parks is the one who asked the question. But leading into the Giants game, Bryce Huff was asked, you're going back into this stadium that you played in as a member of the New York Jets. You haven't found the success this year. What do you attribute it to? Like, is there something that can be done to unlock your potential to get you back to the guy that the Eagles thought they were getting in the offseason? Craig, let's pull that up really quick because I thought Bryce Huff gave one of the most insightful answers we've seen from a player in a very long time. Craig, make sure you crank that audio all the way up. We want it to pretty much blitz the eardrums. We want it to pierce the eardrums of the Delaware Valley. All right, let's go to Bryce Huff.
A lot of talk recently about the difference between lining up with like standing up versus having both hands in the ground. When you have both hands in the ground, you're really explosive off the ball. I was curious for you, just what is the difference in lining up? What are the advantages of one versus the other?
I think it's just comfortability, like knowing my body. I rushed that way for as long as I can remember. So it's like I just got that muscle memory. And my angles are different, like my shin angles and my leverage coming off the ball versus like when you don't know the snap count. From a 2-point stance, you kind of have to lean into it versus in a 4-point stance, you always have that tension on your hands. So like when you lift your hands off the ground, you're moving forward. So it saves time on the rush. I'm used to the timing and all that stuff. So there's a lot that goes into it.
So you did it more in New York, it seems like.
Every
snap, right?
100% of my sacks came off of me being in a 4-point stance.
Do you think you'll be doing it more moving forward than maybe you did before the bye?
I mean, I want to, but like I said, it depends on the scheme and what my coaches see fit for that specific play or week. And then whenever I do get those opportunities, like I said, I'm gonna just capitalize on them. But they haven't said if I will or not. But I just know, like, I talk to my coach and he's just like, yeah, like whenever the scheme allows, like hop in the 4-point.
So that was Bryce Huff last week, leading into the Giants game, and there are times where you ask an athlete something that's like a little bit more technical or you're trying to get something out of them. And a lot of times they just aren't willing to go there with you for whatever reason. Like some players seem to think that if they give you a response that's like somewhat detailed about technique, that it's going to somehow be used against them in a game. Like there's going to be somebody from the other team actively searching out each and every quote that's made to the media to figure out an inside track. And like, maybe that's true. I don't think it is. But in the case of Huff, I was interested because I said, like, he had every opportunity there to potentially throw Vic Fangio under the bus. Like, he could have. He didn't choose to there. He said, like, I haven't been put in that position. I haven't been afforded that opportunity. But, like, there is a way to maybe make me more useful in the passing game, to make me more useful as a pass rusher. Now, Craig, throw it to this other clip because I tried to, like, last week when I heard it, I initially reacted to it in a way that sounded a little bit positive. So we're gonna build positivity off of positivity. All right, Craig, go to this thing. I've had moments on this show where I've pointed out that Bryce Huff has been at 0 because he has been. I can understand why there's frustration on his part. He says, like, look, I've played with my hands in the dirt my entire career. Every sack I had in New York came from playing out of a 4-point stance. The difference between having tension on your hands, being able to lift off and you're gone at 100 miles an hour versus having to lean and just kind of try to time the count. Being half a second later could be the difference between a sack and getting blocked. It could be the difference between getting leverage on an offensive lineman or a tight end that's trying to chip you and actually being able to get around them and pressure the quarterback. I would then throw this to Vic Fangio. All right, man. You are this highly experienced, highly respected defensive coordinator. If it hasn't worked with this guy so far, can we figure out a way to put this guy in position where he might find success? Because if so, and if you are able to actually generate some pressure off the edge, boy, would that be nice. We've been making the joke here for a few weeks, but like, Brandon Graham is an 85-year-old man who looks like the best edge rusher on the team. Can we figure out a way to get Bryce Huff involved? Can we do that? Figure it out. Just a thought. So there you go. That was like the immediate reaction to it. And I'll tell you what, I actually felt a little bit vindicated. I felt a little bit okay because some of the people who I saw respond to that were like, oh, it's all about Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff sucks. He's always sucked. He's a horrible player. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. Blah, 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 blah. Now, listen, I don't know if Bryce Huff is a good player or not. I have no idea. We all know that he was at least a decent enough pass rusher in certain situations that he got himself a big contract. But there was something that happened on Sunday that actually gave me a little bit of hope, that made me think, you know what? It might not be a total bust. There might be a little bit of hope that Bryce Huff is going to turn back into the guy they thought he was going to be all along. Bryce Huff had a sack. And where did the sack come from? He was off to the right of the quarterback. He was in a 4-point stance. He exploded off the line, and he got his first, he got a sack. It was the first sack of the game for him, and he felt great about it. And you could tell it lifted a huge weight. And I'll also tell you, if you go back and watch any of the other sacks that were generated on Sunday, if you go back and you watch some of the film on Huff himself, there were plenty of opportunities that he had where he created so much pressure off the edge from a 4-point stance that he ended up creating legitimate havoc and making Daniel Jones' life absolutely miserable on Sunday. Now, again, am I going to throw down significant money here that Bryce Huff is going to be fixed and put up double-digit sacks this year? No, I'm not insane. I'm a little bit crazy. I'm not fully crazy. But I do think that there's a path here to him not being a total waste of space now. And if you're an Eagles fan, that's ultimately what you should hope for. That's the thing that should ultimately make you feel good is, all right, for the first time they were able to unlock him. And sure, it was at MetLife Stadium where he maybe is a little bit more comfortable, right? Because he played plenty of games there as a member of the Jets. But that to me was encouraging. And it got better. It wasn't just Bryce Huff. Nakobe Dean had 2 sacks. Jalen Carter got to the quarterback twice, 2 sacks. Nolan Smith got to the quarterback with a sack, which was actually a pretty funny moment because it came after a Josh Sweat sack. And Mark Sanchez, who's doing color commentary in the game, who I thought did a horrific job. An all-time bad job. He called Nolan Smith Josh Sweat. And then he began to talk about just how great of a rusher Josh Sweat has always been, which maybe he's been okay. But then he realized, it was Nolan Smith. Mark Dempsey having the Beavis and Butthead moment of the episode so far over on Facebook. Sweat sack. It was a Josh Sweat sack. At least it wasn't a sweaty sack. That's a totally different thing. That made Craig look very uncomfortable on the other side of the glass. Now, anyway, we get back into it. The Eagles defense, I thought, by my eye, looked way better. Significantly better this week. When the Eagles barely beat the Cleveland Browns a week ago, that was the moment where I said, man, you need to have some kind of encouraging signs, right? Offensively, you needed some encouraging signs, but defensively, can we figure out a way to pressure a quarterback? Can you figure out a way to pressure a Deshaun Watson, who, by the way, tore his Achilles? Very sad, I'm sure, for somebody somewhere. Not for most of the football universe, and certainly not for people who have, it doesn't matter. Deshaun Watson out for the rest of the season with a torn Achilles. I digress. The Browns game was largely underwhelming in pretty much every facet of the game, including the fact that there was that blocked field goal that got run back for a touchdown at the end of the first half. It felt like every phase of the game, the Eagles legitimately struggled. Now, you fast forward to Sunday against the Giants, the defense was everywhere. Quinyon Mitchell, who has become easily one of my favorite defensive players, easily one of my favorite defensive players that has been on this team in quite some time. That kid's got a nose for the ball. Now, he doesn't have the stats to back it up this year. Quinyon Mitchell doesn't have, 4 interceptions to his name. But what he does have is a legitimate ability to sniff out where that ball's going, chase it down, and at least get it to hit him in the hands. He had a deep ball that he read the route well, and he's running away from it, and it kind of comes over the top of his head. He puts his hands up. He has it, and he doesn't bring it down. That follows last week where he and CJ smashed into each other around the goal line and what should have probably been an interception for him. But, man, if you just think about what it is to be a young player, to be a young defensive back in this league, the Eagles are getting really good play out of both Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. Now, here we go with Craig with the tweet from Brendan Deeg, who says 28 defensive backs have been targeted at least 33 times this season. Quinyon Mitchell ranks first out of those 28 in passer rating allowed, a true star in the making. So again, let's recap that one more time. 28 defensive backs have had 33 targets thrown their way, and he has the best passer rating allowed, as in he's allowing Jack Diddley squat to the opposition. That's fantastic stuff. And he's a rookie. And you expect quarterbacks, especially veteran quarterbacks, are going to go out of their way to hunt down that matchup. Despite the fact that Darius Slay hasn't had a big play to his name in what feels like since the Clinton administration. It's been a very long time since we've actually seen the big play at a big play Slay. quarterbacks are still a little bit hesitant to throw his way. So then you kind of force them into quite the quandary if you're the Eagles defense, because if they're unwilling to throw it towards Slay, now you've got Quinyon Mitchell, who's been an absolute brick house, who's been a guy who's just shut down the opposition. Cooper DeJean has looked really solid in coverage. We also have to give a tip of the cap here to Cooper DeJean for putting together some legitimate returns on Sunday, like some actual long returns on kickoffs and punts. Like there have been moments where you got to kind of go, ooh, if you're Britton Covey, are you a little bit worried? Are you a little bit worried with your standing in the kicking return game after watching Cooper DeJean go out and do what he's done? He looks elusive. He looks very good. I'm getting like some reminiscent shades of like, remember when Lito Shepherd used to return some punts? Those were the days. I'm just saying, very interesting. Eagles getting some actual contributions from their young defensive backs is huge. Now, we are going from the defensive side of the ball over to the offensive side of the ball. We're going to skip over special teams, but let's talk about the offense, because the offense is the thing that people have been so unbelievably concerned about. And a big part of it is that question, and we're going to continue to ask it here at this show, on the Russ Joy Show, on any other show I ever appear on. I'm going to continue to ask the question, who is making the offensive game plan going into the game, and who's the one calling the plays? Because ultimately, that is what matters. And it has felt for quite some time, even through the Cleveland game, that this doesn't look like a Kellen Moore offense. And I wouldn't exactly say that this Sunday's game looked incredibly different, but the execution was significantly better. Now, you can certainly go out of your way if you want to be a Jalen Hurts hater, and there are many of them out there. You can be a Jalen Hurts hater and say, he missed Devontae Smith on a cross route going over the middle. He missed Saquon Barkley on what could have been a very easy touchdown to the left side. It was a shallow route. Barkley had his hand over his head. It looked like Hurts got locked on Devontae Smith running across the back of the end zone. You could make the argument, if you so choose, that Jalen Hurts had questionable decision-making again. And if you want to go that way, by all means, who am I to stop you? The thing that I guess I'll point out here is they pick up a big touchdown. Once again, a deep ball to A.J. Brown that gives them a little bit more breathing room. The stats themselves aren't the most impressive for Jalen Hurts. 10 of 14, 114 yards, one touchdown. If you had any over with Jalen Hurts other than like touchdowns scored, you're probably kicking yourself today. You probably kicked yourself a little bit yesterday. All right, like it wasn't a stats jump off the page kind of game. And ultimately, the Eagles also sat a good number of their starters, including Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, and the like. So Hurts didn't have the longest day. Kenny Pickett even got some snaps. He went 0 for 1. 0 yards. All those Kenny Pickett lovers out there, maybe another game. Maybe another day. Now, there was one thing that was also encouraging, other than Jalen and Jalen's ability to find A.J. Brown, and other than Jalen's ability to try to get multiple guys involved in the offense. And that notably was that Saquon Barkley had as good of a game as you could ever hope to have against your former team. You go back to the offseason when Hard Knocks came out, and John Mara, the owner of the Giants, said, "I'd hate to lose Saquon Barkley." And their GM said, something to the effect of, we have to be responsible with the money. We have to protect Daniel Jones. How'd that work out? We have to get Daniel Jones more weapons. How'd that work out? And then ultimately, they decided that Saquon Barkley wasn't worth the number that the Eagles were willing to give him. Now, the Giants still contend that they think that the Eagles had this contract worked out ahead of time and that Barkley's agent really gave them no chance to match. It also sounds like at the same time, the Giants had said, we're not willing to go past the number the Eagles were. And whether or not they went back to the Giants and said, here you go, match it or not, I don't think really matters. If you dug your heels in as an organization and said, we're not willing to give you more than $9 million, $10 million, another team comes in and offers 12, 13, whatever. It stands to reason that you're probably not going to change your mind. Now, no matter what, Barkley went into last week. Every comment he had leading up to the game was that there's no animosity to the players, that he's still friends with guys on that team. It came out during the telecast that he wasn't going to trash talk, or that he and a couple of the guys on the Giants had pretty much said to each other, they're not going to trash talk. Dexter Lawrence was going to trash talk. Part of that is you don't want to wake up a sleeping beast, all that. But A.J. Brown said going into the game that he thought that Barkley was going to unleash the beast. that like he knows what it's like to have to play against a former team, and he expected Barkley to have a big game. He didn't just have a big game. He had a massive game. He had an all-timer kind of game. Barkley goes 17 carries for 176 yards and a touchdown. He was incredible. He was next level on Sunday. This is a good tweet, by the way. This is Craig. Scroll down a little bit so people can see the captions, because that's also part of the fun here. The Giants. I think that was John Mara back there saying that it's gonna. Yeah, it is saying that he'd have a tough time seeing Saquon leave. Doesn't want to see him go to Philadelphia, and also noting that he's the most popular player the Giants have by far. Not that $40 million man, Daniel Jones, who's an absolute disgrace and joke. Not that offensive line. Neighbors actually looks like a pretty good player for them, but that's about it. Like, they have very few actual stars on the team. But you have to imagine that the conversation had after that game between ownership and the front office, I would have loved to have been in a fly on the wall. I would have absolutely loved to have seen what was being said behind closed doors after that one. But it gets even better, because Barkley accumulates 176 yards, gashed the Giants for multiple 30-plus, 40-plus yard rushes on the day. But there was a really interesting thing that came out of this game. And Craig, I'll throw this back to you. I believe you had it pulled up, ready to go. But apparently Saquon Barkley was informed that he had the... Whoa, what the heck was that, Craig? Not that. Oh, Craig. Nope. That $1 million salary going down to $800K, baby. There goes 20% reduction. You hate to see it, but we have to do that in this economy. Sirianni said after the game that they notified Barkley that he was close to a career high, professional high. And I want you to hear what Saquon Barkley had to say to Sirianni. And this is per Nick Sirianni. Go ahead, Craig, hit that full screen. Hit that full screen. There we go. There we go. Track that audio up. Here we go. Let's go.
That was on our mind because I got the word from the box that he was close to his career high, and I sat there with him and I said, listen, here's where you are and here's what it is. And he looked at me and he said, I mean, this gives me chills to think about. Like, this guy is such a great teammate and all he cares about is winning. And he looked at me and he said, let the other guys eat. I was like, you're special, dude. And he's a special player. He's a special person. I read all the stuff that all the Giants players were saying about him, and no one said anything. Like I said, it was going to be war, but they all love him. And I know this football team loves him. Man, when somebody's selfless, like you talk about team and the things that it takes to be a team, selflessness is a big part of it. And that guy's selfless. That guy's a baller, and I can't say enough good things about him. That was on our mind because I got the word from.
We'll remove. There we go. So Sirianni had a bunch of good things to say in that clip, but the most notable thing there is that Barkley's a very well-liked guy. This actually has to kind of twist the knife a little bit if you're a Giants fan, right? Like, there was a lot of animosity directed at Saquon Barkley when he left the Giants. And initially, it seemed like people were of the thought that, like, Barkley betrayed the Giants by leaving for a division rival, no less. That it was like almost shades of DeMarco Murray. And what you ended up finding out through Hard Knocks was that, like, no, it was really the Giants who kind of applied the pressure and essentially said, like, no, we're not matching an offer. We're not raising our offer to Saquon Barkley. He's just not worth it. That has to hurt. So there actually were some Giants fans who I think over time realized, oh, we were wrong to, like, hate this guy the way that we did. We were wrong to jump all over this guy. And I'm actually going to throw it because I saw that it was over on Crossing Broad this morning. But I'm going to throw this over to, what's his name? Santiago. Yeah. Santiago Ortiz, who's on TikTok at No Shorts USA. I want you to see what he got out of Giants fans. It froze. Oh, hold on. Here we go. Might be. See, now I'm giving Craig a hard time. Here we go.
Dude, it sucks. It hurt bad.
Oh, yeah. It made me sick to my stomach.
Wish he didn't go to the Eagles because he could be coming back and kicking our ass for years.
Wah! 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 I saw the Hard Knocks clips, and you know what? It made me realize why the Giants stink, because their management is garbage.
Thank you for Saquon.
How do you feel about this Saquon trade? Is it good? Is it bad? How do you feel about Daniel Jones?
Okay. He's done. He's done.
I'm really shocked how honest New York fans were. I did not expect that. Thank you for Saquon.
Now, I don't know if anybody heard it here. I'm going to go back to this guy's clip.
Okay. He's done. He's
Now,
done.
somebody might say that that's like a backing up muffler, that like that's an issue with the ignition. But I think it sounds like this guy pooped his pants.
Okay. He's done. He's done.
I'm really shocked.
Kind of a thunderous, and it ends with that clip, by the way. I'm not sure. But you heard in that clip that there was at least one Giants fan who said, you know what? What I saw from Hard Knocks was enough to make me realize that it was the Giants' fault, that this is why the Giants stink as much as they do. That, to me, has to feel like absolute vindication for Saquon Barkley. He goes up there. He has a massive game. He could have set a career high. Ultimately said, let everybody else eat. Let Kenneth Gainwell get his rushes in. Let other guys on the team eat. I'm good. Like, I've made my point. We're done here. 28-3, a hell of a win. Now, how do I feel about Nick Sirianni a week after saying the Eagles are absolute morons for keeping him and that they were kind of stupid for keeping him after what happened at the end of the Browns game? I still feel the same way that I did before. A win on the road against an absolutely woeful New York Giants team does not now all of a sudden absolve Nick Sirianni of his sins. It doesn't all of a sudden wipe away everything that has gone wrong here. It doesn't all of a sudden change the culture. I said last week, I've said for many weeks leading up to it, I think if the Eagles end up getting healthy, which they're certainly not, right? They lost Mekhi Becton on Sunday. They're down Jordan Mailata still. They've had injuries, like they've lost A.J. Brown and they've lost Devontae Smith for stretches. If they can be a healthy team or relatively healthy team, I still think it's a good roster. And I still think that a good roster can win in spite of their head coach. I'm not going to stand here and say, hey, Sirianni is such a negative that like it's going to tear down the entire fabric of the team. I still think that the talent ultimately can win in spite of the coach. But I don't think that what we saw on Sunday was a Nick Sirianni masterclass of coaching. In fact, what did the Eagles do to start the game that we've all been so upset about? They failed to score in the first quarter again. Again. You know how hard it is to not score in the NFL? You know how hard it is to not score a single time in the entirety of your season thus far in a first quarter? It's difficult. It's really, really difficult. You are scheming specifically to throw off the defense and to set yourself up for what should be some of the easiest points of the game. And yet the Eagles haven't been able to execute. Now, whether you put that on Jalen Hurts, you put that on Kellen Moore, you put that on Nick Sirianni, is up to you. Ultimately, I look at it and say either the play calling and the scheming hasn't worked, or the coach, for whatever reason, hasn't been able to get on the same page with the quarterback. Quarterback certainly hasn't executed to start games. I actually had a real concern with how this game started because I thought that Saquon Barkley should have touched the ball more on that first drive. And then you saw them eventually hand it off to him, and he did significant damage. But here you go, Jeff Skowronski. Eagles still 0 points in the first quarter. First time in Eagles history they failed to score in the first quarter through the first 6 games of the season. I'm not crazy. Or if I am, it's not for this. I'm not crazy for expecting better of the Eagles. I'm not crazy for expecting better of Nick Sirianni's team. Again, you could lay the blame at the feet of whomever you want. I will just simply point out to you that there are a lot of people who have some say in how the offense is run, and nobody's been able to figure out how to execute at a high enough level to at least put up a field goal. The fact that you haven't even gotten 3 points out of a first quarter of the season is insane. And you'll be able to do that against bad teams. You're able to do that against your Clevelands. You're able to do that against your Giants. You're not going to be able to do that later on in the season when you actually have to play a couple of like decent teams. I don't think the Cowboys are particularly great this year, but like, I don't think you're going to be able to beat a Cowboys team if you don't score in the first quarter. Now, we will say the defense, once again, looked good. The Eagles' defense so far this season, if we go back, we kind of rule out the game against the Packers, right? And I know that like not all of these touchdowns have been scored on the defense because there was the special teams touchdown against the Browns. But let's just go total points. So far this season, Eagles gave up 29 in Brazil to the Packers. They only gave up 22 at home to the Falcons in that 1-point loss in week 2. They gave up 12 points on the road against a Saints team that at that point was off to a 2-0 start and looked really good. Don't look at the next 4 games. They lost all 4. Doesn't matter. You were playing against a team that was really hot at that point. They gave up 33 on the road to the Bucs. That was bad. They held the Browns to 16, and now they've held the Giants to 3 on the road. Now they take on a Cincinnati Bengals team this Sunday at 1:00, a team that has Joe Burrow under center. That team is in its own way kind of a mess. And the Bengals have gotten off to some bad starts in the past. They somehow, by the grace of whatever, have won 2 straight games, including a game where Deshaun Watson's Achilles popped. And they are only 2 games out of the lead in the AFC North, despite the fact that they started, 0-3, 0-4? I think it was 0-3. You're not going to be able to get away with it against the Bengals, even though I don't think the Bengals are this like absolute stone cold killer team. I don't think you can get off to such a slow start against the Bengals. Then you play the Jaguars at home. That's fine. Jaguars don't really matter. You play in Dallas against the Cowboys. You can't get off to a bad start there. Home against the Commanders. Commanders are still plucky. They're going to be a tough matchup. You play in LA. Good luck. You play in Baltimore. Good luck. Home against the Panthers, whatever. That gets you early into December. There's a path here to the Eagles winning. I don't know. What did I just do? 5 games? They could beat the Bengals. They'll beat the Jags. They'll lose to the Cowboys. They might beat the Commanders at home. Okay, that's 3-1. 3-2 if you lose to the Rams. 3-3 if you lose to the Ravens. They can play 500 ball over the next 3. That might not be good enough for some people. And I think it's going to depend on how those games play out. Like the game that I actually do care about, and I think most of you do, is that Eagles-Ravens game. Because that's going to give you a much better idea of how legit this team is. That to me feels like the first time that you're going to play against a team that you could maybe, if you really are drinking the Kool-Aid, that you could envision a potential Super Bowl matchup. And the Ravens are only 4-2. Like they're having a good start to the year. They're not undefeated. They don't look as dominant as the Chiefs at 6-0. The Ravens are a good team. Lamar Jackson, a very good quarterback. Derrick Henry's an absolute beast. We'll see how it plays. We'll see how this plays out. I look at 3-3 over the next 6, though. There's nothing in my body and my core that says 5-1. 4-2, I guess, is in play. 3-3, I think, is likely. And you know what? If you're the Eagles and you can tread water and you come out of that stretch and you'll end up being, 7-5 at that point, you're okay. It's not the worst thing in the world. That Commanders game is going to be big, though. Commanders are still up on you by 1 in the win column. So that would end up being a very important game. Like I said, they're a plucky team. They've had a lot of good going for them. The Cowboys, there's a rumor that the Cowboys actually lost this weekend to the bye week. They actually lost. So that's going to reflect on their record. They're now under 500. They're 3-3.5. All right, I'm done with the Eagles. It looks like most of the people in the comments are also done with the Eagles as well. Let's go to 1 or 2 other things really quick before we head out. By the time we talk on Thursday, or Kincaid talks to you on Thursday, the Philadelphia 76ers will have tipped off their first game of the season. And as of right now, there are plenty of questions around whether or not Joel Embiid and Paul George are going to play on opening night. It seems like the hope is that Embiid could maybe play in the home opener. Paul George, they were a little bit worried about for opening night. They were thinking that maybe it's going to be a little bit too close, that it might be a little bit tricky getting him in there, that you don't want to rush him back from the bone bruise when he had the hyperextended knee. And as of right now, it's still being reported by the beats that Embiid and Paul George have a chance to play. One guy who will not play on Wednesday is Chris Middleton. He will be out for the Bucks. How much of an impact is that going to have? I have no idea. Is that really that big for the Bucks? It's somewhat important. I don't know if that necessarily means that it's going to sway the line that much. Now, listen, if the Sixers do suit up Joel Embiid and if they do suit up Paul George, I fully expect a solid win by the Sixers on opening night. I don't think this Bucks team is that great. I really don't. Like every time I try to line up what I think the top 4 of this conference is going to look like, it's some combination of Boston, New York. I usually mix Milwaukee in there somewhere, and the Sixers. I think the Sixers are a better team than Milwaukee. I actually think that the Knicks have a good chance of having a better record than the Bucks this year as well. And it's a Doc Rivers coach team. It's a team that has legitimate injury concerns. Middleton is one of them. Dame Lillard looked like he took a tremendous step backward last year. Giannis is Giannis. He will continue to be their one consistent, their one constant, the guy that actually is worth going to see play. But like, I think that the Bucks window has closed in a significant way. And so if you're the Sixers, your goal on Wednesday night has to be to go out and put out a competent performance, get the most out of Tyrese Maxey, hope that you can get Paul George in the lineup, even if he only plays like 15 minutes. Get him to play 15, maybe 20 minutes. Get him in front of the home crowd. Let the fans get excited about what can be. He'll probably go out and drop you 15 points. If he only plays 15, 20 minutes, he'll play a hard 15 or 20. Probably get you 15 points. Look better than Tobias Harris ever did. If Embiid gets to play, fans are going to be, kind of gasping every time he hits the ground. But that is kind of the reality of having to play or having to build your team around Joel Embiid. Now, there's one guy who I don't think is going to watch this game. There's one guy who I think is actively going to do whatever it takes to not watch any Joel Embiid, and that's Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett has a legitimate vitriolic response every time Joel Embiid's name comes up. And I'm actually going to throw this up here. This was on the All the Smoke podcast. Kevin Garnett talked about the fact that Embiid said he's not going to play back-to-backs anymore. That, like, as far as he's concerned, he's done playing back-to-backs for the rest of his career. That it's likely going to require him to just not play back-to-backs if he wants to stay healthy and be available for the playoffs. So let's go over to the All the Smoke podcast and let's listen to Kevin Garnett, noted former Celtic. I liked him when he was a Timberwolf. He's right here on the poster as a Timberwolf. I liked him when he was a Timberwolf. I didn't like him as a Celtic. All right, anyway, here's Kevin Garnett talking to Paul Pierce, another dirty Celtic, talking about Joel Embiid and him not playing back-to-backs.
You think it's a good number of games he played?
82 games, man. This is what the fucking job calls for. You're not practicing. You're not even playing a whole fucking, you don't play in the summer.
Right.
I can see if you playing in the summer, you on the playground, you went to the Olympics, then it's training camp. Y'all do 30 days of fucking tour days. Okay, that's when you get rest. Man, I don't want to hear this shit, man. I don't want to hear none of this shit. Motherfucker can sit out a back-to-backs. Bro, hey, listen, we done with that comparison of the era shit. We're going to respect this era and what it does, and that's it.
Kevin Garnett really
don't compare nobody and none of this shit because you can't. If you ain't played, man, listen.
I think that's going to hurt Philly.
That's going to hurt Philly from not even that, but bro.
From a seeding perspective.
It's rhythm. One night I got P, next night I ain't got it.
You might have to they might put themselves in the position to where they play Boston in the first round.
Bro, the league got to get
might
this
not
under
be
control,
good.
bro. This is all over the place. Real shit. And ain't nobody saying nothing. You know what I'm saying? Ain't nobody holding nobody accountable, bro. So not only are they not going to practice, they going to sit out. I ain't got you in 15.
Hey, look
back to back.
So there are a few things to point out here. Now, again, Kevin Garnett, one of the best ever. I liked Kevin Garnett as a player. I didn't like him as a Celtic, but I liked him as a player. I totally get why people are afraid of Kevin Garnett. 100%. I get why they respect him. I get why they're afraid of him. Okay. Kevin Garnett, in that clip, does admit that, like, they need to stop comparing the generations. They need to stop comparing the league as it was when he played versus the league as it exists now. And he's right. It probably is time to stop comparing the two. But then he goes on to say 82 games. That's how many games you need to play. And that it's going to hurt the Sixers. That is true. He is right. It will hurt the Sixers, but it's going to hurt them in two ways, I guess. I've said for quite a while, I think the Sixers probably finish with either the third or the fourth seed in the East because I don't think they're going to actively try to chase down the top seed. The way that you try to actively chase down the top seed is by having Joel Embiid and Paul George playing healthy every night. But the reality, and the utopian version of this are two distinctly different things. So if you're the Sixers, your real goal has to be, how do we get Joel Embiid into the playoffs in bubble wrap and then unwrap him so that he's healthy for the postseason? They have yet to figure that out. Now, part of Embiid saying that he's not going to play both ends of a back-to-back, both halves of the back-to-back, is that he wants to actually be healthy in the playoffs for the first time in his career. And you know what? Tip of the cap to them. Because for a long time, it's felt like he wanted to go out and get that MVP. He did. He wants to be like a first-team All-NBA guy. Not saying that he was like unbelievably selfish, right? I don't want it to get twisted. Like, let's not twist that. But like, I do think that some personal accomplishments were things that he cared about. I don't blame him. He's a pro. He has MVP talent. Why wouldn't you want to go out and win the MVP award if you can? But at this point now, he seems more focused on, all right, I've gotten those accolades. Let's go win a title. I won a gold medal as part of Team USA. Let's go. Now it's about getting that championship. You want to be a guy who doesn't have the, yeah, but he never won one. You don't want to have the Charles Barkley issue. You don't want to have the Karl Malone or the John Stockton issue of, I never won a championship. Oh, you're one of those guys. He wants to win a title. And the way that he's going to do it in his mind, and probably in the mind of the Sixers, is stay healthy. Don't put yourself at risk. This team should still be good enough. And I'd argue that this team is still deep enough as currently constructed that they should be able to miss Joel Embiid for 20 games out of the year. If Joel Embiid plays 60, 62 games and doesn't actually get hurt, they're load managing him. He plays 60, 62 games. He's in rhythm and they get to the playoffs. The sky's the limit. If they start to get overly cautious and then he tweaks something and he never actually does get fully healthy, then you actually do hurt yourself in the standings, because then it goes from, all right, we're going to try to win every night, but realistically, we'll probably finish with the third or fourth best record, to, oh, he's out now for 20, 30 games with an actual injury. And now all of a sudden, the entire equation changes. Now, Andre Drummond is a really good backup center, and I like Andre Drummond a lot. And I think he's going to pay massive dividends for this team in games when Embiid doesn't play. But like, you do need to have Embiid at least somewhat consistently. And Paul George is really the key to the whole thing. We know what we have in Tyrese Maxey. We know what we've got in Joel Embiid when he's healthy. Paul George is going to have to get himself integrated into this team. Like, that to me is like where Paul Pierce is kind of talking about the idea of like, you know, a cohesive unit. That's the part that actually does matter. Paul George is going to have to play games with Embiid and Maxey. You're going to have to play enough of those games where when you hit the playoffs, there's actual chemistry. The thing that like doomed the Clippers, let's say last year, was that like James Harden and Paul George and Kawhi Leonard barely played together at all. I forget how many, it might've been like 13 games where all three of them played in the same game together. You can't build chemistry that way. And you certainly can't contend for a championship that way. The number one goal is get Embiid and Paul George comfortable together with Tyrese Maxey, and then fast forward as quickly as you can to the playoffs and try to make it in healthy. We'll see how this one plays out, because I honestly don't know what Wednesday is going to look like. The hope, obviously, is that they're going to have Embiid in the lineup, Paul George in the lineup, but they might not. And if they don't, it's going to affect things. Check out Crossing Broad. I'm sure Kincaid will be covering it leading up to the game, and you can check back in on Thursday's show for some recap, then Friday on the Russ Joy Show, and we'll talk about it. Now, last thing I want to get to before we head out is the Philadelphia Flyers, who had their home opener on Saturday. And I mentioned earlier, they had their home opener, but they might not have realized it. They got shut out 3-0 by Vancouver in a game where we saw back-to-back goals in what felt like 15 or 20 seconds of actual game time between the second goal and the third goal. Third goal came off a face-off on a shot that never should go in, on a play that shouldn't work. And the Flyers looked mostly listless in the game. They had little to no jump, but the big story coming out of the game, or at least going into it, was Sean Couturier's 800th game as a pro, 800 games in the National Hockey League. And it was also the Flyers' home opener, and he's the captain. And we know that last year, Torts named him the captain. Shortly thereafter, benched him. It started this whole thing, and the Flyers, boy, the floor really fell out from under them, and they ended the season on a hell of a losing streak. They ended in a very poor way, where it felt like they were kind of in the driver's seat to get one of the final playoff spots. Everything fell apart for them down the stretch, and to me, it was no coincidence. Two things: they traded Walker, which hurt their defensive core, sure, but I think it drastically changed things in that locker room. I do think that there was a negative feeling among the players that For some reason, the captain was getting an example made of him, despite the fact that he's a consummate professional and somebody that those guys like, the organization likes, everyone seems to like. And yet, the coach made an example out of the captain. You fast forward to this past Saturday, 800th career game, home opener. Where's Sean Couturier start? Oh, he's not the 1C. That's okay. Probably the 2C, right? It'll be the second line. Maybe he'll be centering Mishkov or something, right? No, not the third line center. Obviously, has to be third line center. No? Oh, they're going to play him on the wing. Oh, well, that's weird, but okay. Is he going to play with Jet Lachenko, who's got all this incredible speed? We're going to see Couturier, Lachenko, Mishkov. That'd be weird, but okay, I guess we could get behind. Oh, what's that? The fourth line left wing in his 800th game. Now, it's interesting because some Flyers fans, when I noted this on Twitter, and I said, it sure looks like things are going well between the coach and the captain. A lot of filleting of torts. I don't know if I've ever seen a fan base in Philadelphia go as head over heels in love with a coach as much as some Flyers fans are with John Tortorella. I don't think I've ever seen it. It didn't happen like this with Vigneault, although people made a lot of martini jokes. But they didn't do this with Vigneault. They didn't do this with Dave Hackstall. They didn't really do this with Lavi. People really liked Lavi. A big part of that was the 24/7 series. They liked Lavi. They certainly didn't do this with Hitchcock. They didn't do this with John Stevens. Okay, so from a Flyers perspective, I can't ever think of a time that there were fans who were just ready to lap up whatever was given to them by the head coach, who would just give carte blanche each and every time. It was never his fault for anything. Okay, fine. So then it's like, all right, let's go to the Phillies. Well, they don't do that with Rob Thompson. They didn't do it with Joe Girardi. They didn't do it with Ryan Sandberg. They didn't do it really with Charlie Manuel. Even when the Phillies were at their peak powers, people still found things to critique about Charlie Manuel. They didn't do it with Larry Boa. So, we'll take them down. Let's go to the Sixers. Doc Rivers? No. Do they make all the excuses for Nick Nurse? Not to my knowledge. I could be wrong. I don't think I am. Did they make excuses for Tony DeLeo or Chris Ford or Mo Cheeks? I don't think so. So you take all of that and you go, all right, what's the last Eagles coach that people just gave the benefit of the doubt to each and every time? They didn't do it with Andy Reid. They didn't do it with Chip Kelly. They didn't do it with Doug Peterson. They're certainly not doing it with Nick Sirianni. So if I lay all those out and I say to you, okay, here are all the coaches in like the last 10, 15 years. I probably missed one or two. None of them have been given the kind of blank slate that Flyers fans give John Tortorella. It's like the guy is totally infallible, which he is decidedly not. I'm sorry, there aren't many coaches in this league who will look at this captain, who's thought of as positively as he is, who's been a professional the way that he is, and say, you know what? Fourth line left wing. That's not normal. That's not the kind of thing that you do to somebody who is respected. You don't do it. Now, I saw it was Jordy from Barstool responded to the tweet and was like, I didn't realize you were a participation trophy guy. I'm not. But I am a little bit of a traditionalist in it's his 800th career game. It's the home opener. You don't have to play him as 1C. Play him on the third line. We probably go, you know what? His play hasn't been great lately. So, all right, that's fine. Makes sense. Kind of sucks, but okay. Fourth line left wing is sending a message. And that message didn't work because those guys didn't come out with their hair lit on fire. They legitimately struggled to get anything going against the Canucks. And in fact, in a lot of ways, the Canucks ran circles, skated circles around them. Now, in fairness, the Flyers were coming off a West Coast swing. It's hard to adjust from West Coast to East Coast. They were going back and forth between time zones. They said after the game that wasn't it. It's no excuse, yada, yada, yada. Vancouver had been playing on the East Coast. They were adjusted to the time. I'm sorry. Something is amiss, okay? And as of right now, I don't see anything that tells me that this locker room is going out and losing their shit, super excited to play for John Tortorella. I see a team that right now looks like, not that they've given up. I don't think they're going to give up on each other. I'm starting to see some signs of things that make me think that maybe some of the guys are starting to tune it out. And I made this warning last year that if you fired the shots that Tortorella took at the end of last season, if you were willing to bench your captain to try to galvanize the team, that is a move that you make when you're trying to get over the hump and win a Stanley Cup. That team was not that kind of team. And what you risk is that you burn out any equity you've built up with those players. And as of right now, when I watch this Flyers team play, I see a team that has some young guys who are skating hard. I see some vets playing pretty hard, but I'm not seeing a team that looks like a total unit right now. I'm not seeing a team that's willing to be physically dominant or assertive. I'm seeing a team that's kind of going out there and kind of going through some of the motions, and I'm not exactly sure that Torts has the recipe to fix it this season. But I could be wrong. We'll get into all that and more tomorrow on the Russ Joy Show, Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. Go subscribe over on YouTube, The Drive to 500. If you subscribe to the channel over on the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel, you subscribe. When the channel hits 500, I'll do a randomized drawing. I'll pull a name of a random subscriber. That person gets the jersey of their choice worth up to $175. So it could be Sixers, Eagles, Flyers, Phillies. It could even be a Union jersey. It could be a non-Philly team. That'd be kind of funny and sad at the same time, but it could happen. Anyway, big thank you to Craig on the other side. We're going to bump his salary back up to $1 million. We're going to give him the 20% that we took away earlier. He just sent over a heart, which is great. Much appreciated. So big thank you to everybody over in the comments today over on YouTube. There were many comments on YouTube. I think some of them got pulled up, not all of them, but a big thank you to the people on YouTube, on Facebook, and on X. I'll be back on Tuesday morning with the Russ Joy Show. Kevin Kincaid will be back here in the lead chair on Crossing Broadcast Thursday. Everybody have a great rest of your day. I will talk to all of you very, very